Hey there, deep diver. Welcome back to another deep dive.
Uh,
Today we're going to be looking at generative AI and how it's changing the game for creating test data.
Really exciting stuff.
Yeah. So whether you're, coder or just, interested in the future of tech, I think get ready for some serious aha moments here. We're
Okay.
going to be looking at this article, How to Use Generative AI for Efficient Test Data Creation and Earn More. And this is definitely knowledge that could change the way you think about building and testing software.
It's a real paradigm shift, and I think the article highlights some pretty incredible potential benefits. We're talking faster development, better quality products, and even, a boost to your bottom line.
Okay.
And it all comes down to the power of, efficient and effective testing.
Okay. So I think most of us can kind of grasp the idea of AI writing poems or composing music,
Hmm.
but generating data for testing software, like that seems like a whole other level.
Hmm.
It is. It is. Imagine you're building a self-driving car.
Yeah.
You need to test it in millions of different scenarios. Snow, rain, traffic, pedestrians, like you name it. So instead of sending a real car out into all those situations, you can use generative AI to create a virtual world with simulated data that mirrors those conditions.
Hmm.
It's like having a giant super realistic video game just for testing your software.
Okay, that's a pretty mind-blowing visual. So instead of real-world data from, say, sensors on a test car, we're talking about AI creating data that's just as good, essentially, for testing purposes.
Exactly, and that's where the real magic happens.
Right.
See, traditional methods of creating test data can be slow, expensive, and even risky when you're dealing with sensitive information.
Mm-hmm.
Generative AI swoops in to address all those challenges.
Okay. And the article mentioned an e-commerce company that actually cut their data creation costs in half using generative AI. That's a serious saving. What was their secret sauce? What did they do differently?
It all comes down to efficiency. Imagine you need data that reflects customer shopping habits. Traditionally, you might spend weeks or even months collecting and cleaning real customer data. With generative AI, you can train an AI model. You can think of it as a data artist on a smaller set of real data. And this data artist learns the patterns and then generates a whole bunch of synthetic data that mimics real customer behavior.
So it's like having a team of super efficient data entry clerks, but without the coffee breaks or the need for office space.
You got it. And this e-commerce company, they needed to test their recommendation engine. That's the part of their website that suggests products to customers. But they couldn't use real customer data because of privacy regulations like GDPR. So they trained a specific type of AI model. Think of it as a virtual shopper on anonymized customer data. And this virtual shopper learned how real people browse and buy, and then created a massive amount of synthetic shopping data for testing.
And that's how they achieved those cost savings. They skipped the tedious and expensive process of collecting and cleaning real data, but they also improved the accuracy of their recommendation engine, right?
Right, again. By testing on a wider range of scenarios generated by their AI, they uncovered hidden patterns and improved the overall shopping experience. This led to more satisfied customer, which ultimately translated into a boost in sales.
Talk about a win-win. So generative AI can help create data faster and cheaper, but the article also highlighted the importance of data diversity and coverage. Can you unpack that a little?
Absolutely. Think about testing a banking app. You need to see how it handles typical transactions like deposits and withdrawals, but you also need to test those rare events like multiple failed login attempts or transactions from unusual locations. These are your edge cases,
Uh-huh.
and traditionally they've been tough to simulate.
And I bet these edge cases are even more crucial in fields like healthcare, where you're dealing with a vast range of medical conditions and treatment possibilities.
Precisely. The article mentioned a healthcare software provider that needed to test a new electronic health records system. They couldn't use real patient data because of strict IPA regulations.
That makes sense. Patient privacy is paramount in healthcare.
Exactly. So they turned to generative AI to create synthetic patient data. They trained their AI on de-identified data, and it learned to create, realistic but totally fake patient profiles.
Okay.
It's like creating a virtual hospital full of digital patients to test on without any privacy risks.
So it's not just about generating more data, it's about generating the right kind of data. Data that covers a wider range of scenarios, including those rare edge cases that are critical for thorough testing.
You're getting it. And this is where generative AI really shines. It allows you to create data that's tailored to your specific testing needs, helping you uncover potential problems early on and build more robust software.
Okay, I'm seeing the value here. Generative AI for test data sounds like a powerful tool for any company building software. But let's get practical. If someone listening to this is thinking, I want to use this in my company, what are the steps involved in actually implementing generative AI for test data creation?
The article outlines a clear 5-step implementation process, and it all starts with defining your goals. What kind of data do you need, and what are your specific testing objectives?
Okay.
It's like drawing up a blueprint before you start building a house.
So first, we need to figure out what we want to build before we start gathering the materials. Makes sense. What's next?
Next, you need to choose the right AI model for the job. Remember those data artists and virtual shoppers I mentioned? There's a whole toolbox of AI models, each with its own strengths.
So it's like picking the right tool from a toolbox, depending on whether you need a hammer, a screwdriver, or a power drill.
Perfect analogy. You've got your GANs, your VAEs, your transformers, each designed for different tasks. Choosing the right model is key to getting the best results.
And once you've got your model, you need to train it, right? Like teaching your data artist how to paint or your virtual shopper how to browse.
Exactly. You train your chosen model using real data. Kind of like showing your data artist examples of great paintings or taking your virtual shopper on a real shopping trip. This is how the AI learns the patterns and nuances it needs to generate realistic synthetic data.
So the quality of the training data is super important. Garbage in, garbage out, right?
You know it. The better the training data, the better the synthetic data will be. If you train your data artist on blurry photos, you'll get blurry synthetic images. Same goes for your virtual shopper. If you only show them bad shopping habits, well, you get the idea.
So once the model is trained and ready to go, it's time to let it loose and generate all that beautiful synthetic test data. Then what? What are the next steps?
That's where we move on to step 4, validation. Just because the data is generated by AI doesn't mean it's automatically perfect. You need to make sure it meets the requirements you defined in the first step and that it behaves realistically during testing.
So it's like having a quality control check to make sure your data artist hasn't accidentally painted a Picasso in the style of a kindergarten finger painting.
Huh, exactly. You need to check for accuracy, consistency, and just generally make sure the data makes sense in the context of what you're testing.
Sounds like a good time to bring in some data experts to double check everything.
Absolutely. And finally, once you're happy with the quality of your synthetic data, you need to integrate it into your testing pipeline. This is where you automate the process of generating and using this data so that you can easily run tests whenever you need to.
The article mentioned some tools like Docker and Jenkins that can help streamline this process.
Those are just a couple of examples. There's a whole ecosystem of tools emerging to make working with generative AI for test data easier and more efficient. Think of it like having a robot assistant to help your data artist or virtual shopper work even faster.
Okay, this all sounds incredibly promising, but I know there are always two sides to every coin. What about the potential challenges or things to be wary of when implementing generative AI for test data? I know the article mentioned a few.
You're right, no technology is a silver bullet. And it's important to be aware of the potential pitfalls. One challenge is the initial setup cost. Implementing generative AI can require some upfront investment in computing power and expertise, especially for complex projects.
That makes sense. It's like any new technology, there's a learning curve and some initial expenses involved.
Exactly. But like we discussed with that e-commerce company, those initial investments can often lead to significant long-term cost savings and efficiency gains.
Okay, so initial cost is one consideration. What else should we be thinking about?
Well, there's also the question of data validation. We talked about the importance of checking the quality of the synthetic data, but it's not just a one-time thing. As your software evolves and your testing needs change, you need to continuously validate your synthetic data to make sure it's still relevant and accurate.
So it's like making sure your data artist skills stay sharp and that your virtual shopper keeps up with the latest trends.
Exactly. And there are tools and techniques emerging to help with this ongoing validation process. It's an area of active research and development.
That makes sense. So we've talked about the potential of generative AI for test data, the steps involved in implementing it, and even some potential challenges. But what about real-world examples beyond that e-commerce company? I know the article highlighted some other industries where this technology is making a real difference.
Absolutely. Why don't we dive into those fascinating real-world examples in part 2 of our deep dive?
Sounds like a plan. Can't wait to hear about those. See you in part 2.
Welcome back, Deep Diver. I am ready to hear about these real-world examples that you teased at the end of part 1.
Let's jump right in. We touched on the retail world with that e-commerce company example, but imagine applying this tech to something like healthcare, where the stakes are so high. The article highlights a software provider that needed to test a new electronic health record system.
But they couldn't use real patient data because of those strict IMAP regulations.
I can see how that would be a major roadblock. Patient privacy is paramount in healthcare. How did they manage to test their system without access to real data?
This is where generative AI comes in. They used a combo of those data artist AI models we discussed earlier, specifically VAEs and JANs, to create synthetic patient data. It was like building a virtual hospital full of digital patients, each with a realistic medical history, demographics, everything.
So instead of using data from actual patients, they created a simulated patient population to test their software on. That's pretty incredible.
It is. And the beauty of it is that the synthetic data mirrors real demographics, diagnoses, and treatment patterns, but contains zero actual personal information.
Okay.
This allowed them to thoroughly test their system under a variety of conditions, even those super rare medical cases that would be difficult, if not impossible, to replicate with real patient data.
It sounds like they created a safe space to experiment and innovate without putting any real patients' privacy at risk. Did they face any other challenges?
Testing with synthetic data allowed them to stay fully compliant with QIAP, avoiding any potential fines or reputational damage. Plus, they were able to test their system much more comprehensively than they could have with traditional methods.
It sounds like using generative AI not only solved a major problem, but also unlocked new possibilities for testing and innovation in healthcare.
Exactly. And this approach has implications far beyond healthcare. Think about the banking industry, where security and privacy are top of mind. The article mentions a bank that used generative AI to test its fraud detection system,
Uh-huh.
a pretty high-stakes scenario.
Yeah, I can see why they wouldn't want to use real customer data for that. What did they do instead?
Well, they couldn't use real customer data for security reasons, so they trained a JAN model on a data set of completely anonymized transactions.
Okay.
Basically, they created a whole world of virtual financial transactions,
Uh-huh.
simulating both legitimate transactions and those tricky fraudulent ones.
It sounds like they were able to train their fraud detection system to spot even the most sophisticated scams without putting any real customer data at risk.
Exactly. And this approach has a ripple effect. By improving the accuracy of their fraud detection system, they're not just protecting their own bottom line, they're safeguarding their customers' finances as well.
That's a fantastic example of how generative AI can be used to create a more secure digital world.
It is. Now, shifting gears a bit, the article also touched on something I think is super interesting, how businesses can leverage generative AI to actually boost their bottom line.
Okay.
Not just save money, but make more of it.
Yeah. I'm all ears. It sounds like we're moving from the what to the how, and that's where things get really exciting. What are some of the key takeaways from the article?
Well, one of the biggest advantages is the ability to offer faster project turnaround times. Time is money in any business, right?
Right.
By streamlining the testing process with generative AI, companies can deliver projects faster and take on more clients.
So it's not just about internal efficiency, it's about being able to deliver value to clients more quickly, which can translate into increased revenue. That makes sense.
Exactly. And this ties into another key point, improved product quality. By testing with diverse and comprehensive data generated by AI, you can identify and address potential issues much earlier in the development process,
Mm-hmm.
leading to fewer bugs and a much smoother user experience for your customers.
Happy customers are definitely good for business. Fewer complaints, less time spent on bug fixes, that all adds up to a healthier bottom line.
Absolutely. And the article brought up another intriguing angle, the ability to scale your testing for those big enterprise-level clients.
I can see how that would be a huge advantage, especially for companies working with organizations that handle massive amounts of data.
Right. Generative AI allows you to create those huge data sets needed for testing complex systems. This means you can take on bigger projects, command higher fees, and really position yourself as a leader in your field.
It sounds like having this capability with generative AI could be a game changer for companies that want to play in the big leagues.
You got it. But let's not forget about compliance. We've talked a lot about how generative AI can help avoid those costly fines and penalties associated with data privacy regulations like GDPR, but the article actually framed compliance as a revenue-generating opportunity.
That's interesting. How so?
By showcasing your commitment to data privacy and security through the use of synthetic data, you attract clients who are particularly sensitive to those concerns.
So it's not just about avoiding losses, it's about positioning yourself as a trusted partner who takes data privacy seriously, which can actually bring in more business.
Exactly. It all adds up to a pretty compelling picture of how generative AI can be a powerful tool for driving business growth. It's not just about the technology itself, it's about using it strategically to unlock new possibilities and create a real competitive advantage.
I'm definitely seeing the potential. What else did the article touch on?
Well, they also highlighted some real-world case studies that demonstrate the power of generative AI for driving revenue growth. I think you'll find these examples particularly fascinating.
I'm ready to dive into those. Let's hear what they're doing out there in the real world.
Okay, so we're back, ready to hear those real-world examples of companies using generative AI to not just survive, but thrive.
All right, so get this. The article features a UK-based e-commerce company that was struggling to keep up with, you know, seasonal buying trends for their recommendations. They needed a way to test how their website would handle those surges in traffic and buying patterns, but using real customer data was off the table because of GDPR.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't just throw caution to the wind when it comes to customer data,
Right.
especially with regulations like GDPR breathing down your neck.
Exactly. So they turned to generative AI and created what was essentially, a virtual world of shoppers using a Jan. They fed their AI anonymized customer data and it learned to simulate all sorts of shopping behaviors, from everyday browsing to those, crazy holiday shopping sprees. So instead of waiting for the actual holiday rush, they could simulate it on demand using this like virtual army of shoppers. That's pretty
It
genius.
is, and the results speak for themselves. They were able to run tests and fine-tune their recommendations well in advance, ensuring a smooth and personalized shopping experience for their customers, even during peak seasons.
Okay.
No website crashes, no frustrated customers, just happy shoppers and increased sales.
That's a brilliant example of how generative AI can turn a potential business bottleneck into a competitive advantage.
Absolutely. And it highlights, a crucial point speed. Being able to test and adapt quickly is essential in today's fast-paced business world. This company was able to stay ahead of the curve and capitalize on those seasonal buying trends.
And I bet other companies are taking notice and realizing the potential here. Did the article mention any other industries where generative AI is being used for profit?
They did. There's a fascinating case study about a financial services company that was developing a new robo-advisor platform, those AI-powered tools that provide automated financial advice.
Yeah, I've heard of those. It seems like they're becoming more and more popular these days.
They are. But testing these platforms is incredibly complex. You need data that reflects a wide range of financial situations, risk tolerances, and market conditions.
Right.
Getting that kind of data in the real world is not only time-consuming and expensive, but also raises all sorts of privacy concerns.
So how did they tackle this challenge? Did they build their own, virtual Wall Street?
You're catching on.
Mm.
They actually use generative AI to create a virtual stock market.
Okay.
Think of it like a giant simulator that could generate synthetic data representing years of market activity, including all the ups and downs you'd expect to see in the real world.
So they could test their robo-advisor in all kinds of market scenarios, bull markets, bear markets, everything in between, without risking a single real dollar. That's pretty amazing.
Exactly. They were able to identify potential weaknesses in their algorithms, fine-tune their risk management strategies, and ultimately build a more robust and reliable platform.
Yeah.
And all of this without putting any real client money at risk.
It sounds like generative AI is not only changing the game for testing software, but also opening up a whole new world of possibilities for financial modeling and analysis.
You nailed it. And here's where it gets really interesting. This financial services company didn't just use the synthetic data for internal testing.
Uh-huh.
They actually used it to train their robo-advisor to make more informed and personalized investment recommendations for their clients.
So the synthetic data helped them build a better product, which then attracted more customers and ultimately led to increased revenue. It's a brilliant example of how innovation can drive business growth.
Right, and it underscores the importance of understanding the needs of your customers. In this case, the company knew that their clients wanted personalized financial advice that was tailored to their individual circumstances and goals. Generative AI allowed them to deliver on that promise.
These examples are so inspiring. It's amazing to see how companies are using this cutting-edge technology to not only solve problems, but also unlock new opportunities for growth and innovation.
I agree. And it's just the beginning. As generative AI continues to evolve, we can expect to see even more creative applications emerge across all sorts of industries.
I'm excited to see what the future holds. It seems like the possibilities are truly endless. Any final thoughts for our deep divers out there?
Well, if you're involved in any aspect of software development Or if you're just fascinated by the power of I encourage you to keep exploring this topic. Generative AI is transforming the way we build and test software, and the implications are far-reaching.
Couldn't agree more. A huge thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into the world of generative AI. It's been an eye-opening journey, to say the least.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to share knowledge and insights that can help others navigate the ever-evolving world of technology.
And to all our listeners out there, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Who knows? Maybe you'll be the one using generative AI to build the next groundbreaking technology. Until next time.